for August 11th, 2022. Before we begin, I would like to notify everyone that the meeting is being recorded. Does anyone object at this time?
No.
If there are any objections from a member of the public, they could be invited to not speak during the meeting, or they may leave the meeting. Chair Westover will be controlling the flow of the meeting, and we will introduce each action item, discussion, and information item prior to the board's discussion and any voting that may take place or public comment on those action items. Just a quick reminder to ask everyone to speak loudly and clearly throughout the meeting. And if you are not speaking, to please mute your mic so that we do not get background interference then. So Craig, if you would like to do the introductions, and then we'll proceed with the meeting.
Okay, Ms. Leffler, we need to establish the fact that we do have a quorum. So Chair Westover is in attendance. Can I have a roll call for the rest of the members?
John Bruno, Vice Chair. Present.
Christian Norwood-Foden, present.
Joanne Reed, please.
Okay, I did hear Chair Westover, Vice Chair Bruno, Board Member Bud Pites, Board Member Tricia Norwood-Foden, and also Board Member Major Reed from PSP. So we have established a quorum for the meeting. Okay, I will go ahead and recognize the PCCD staff on the call. We have the Office of Justice Programs, Office Director Sally Berry, myself, Sherry Leffler, Supervisor for the Constables Education and Training Board, Tracy Beaver, also with the Constables Education and Training Program, Nick Hartman, also with the Constables Program, Dorothy Jacobelli with our Office of Fiscal Management. We also have Deborah Sandifer, who is our legal counsel here at PCCD. Megan Staub is also on the is also on the call. She is the curriculum manager for all of the curriculum that is created for the Constables Program. Am I missing any other PCCD staff that I did not recognize on the call? Okay, hearing none. If I could just ask real quickly if any of the training delivery contractors are on the call, and if they could recognize and identify themselves.
Hi, Sherry. This is Steve Sheilo from Penn State.
Thank you, Steve.
Tony Muhal with Penn State.
Thank you, Tony. And I believe we also have Tony Luwanga from Temple University, who provides both training delivery for the Constables Program and also curriculum development, as well as the online delivery through Temple's Canvas system. I do see that he is logged into the call as well. Okay, Craig, we can go ahead and start in with the meeting then.
Okay, we'll move to the first action item, which is the unapproved draft minutes of the May 5th, 2022 meeting. I recognize Nick Hartman from staff if he would cover that for us.
Nick, you're muted.
Thank you, Megan. Program staff is asking for the approval of the unapproved draft meeting minutes of the May 5th, 2022 meeting, excuse me, which can be found on pages 2 through 12 in the board packet. Are there any questions from the board regarding the meeting minutes?
No, sir. Not from me.
No, I have none, Nick.
None
Okay,
for
not
me.
hearing any additional comments or questions, do I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I'll make that motion. John Bruno.
I'll
Okay.
second it, Fights.
All right, any additional questions from anybody, including the public, about the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor, roll call vote, state your name and your vote. Chairman Westover, aye. Who else?
Joanne Reed,
John
aye.
Bruno, aye. Bruno, aye.
Norwood Bowden, aye.
Bites, aye.
Motion's been approved. All right, we'll move on to the second action item, which will be the unapproved financial report for the August 11th, 2022 meeting. The chair will recognize Dorothy Giacobelli. If you would cover that for us, please.
Good morning. Fiscal report for the fourth quarter of the state fiscal year 2021-22 ending June 30th, 2022 can be found on pages 13 through 18 of your packet, beginning with the statement of cash receipts, expenditures, and commitments on page 13. Under receipts, the balance carried forward from the prior fiscal year is $2,478,756.38. Fees collected for the fourth quarter ending 6/30/2022 are through the fourth quarter, $1,277,817.56. The total funds available as of June 30th, 2022 are $1,756,573.94. Under expenditures and commitments, total cumulative expenditures as of June 30th, 2022 were $670,253.90. And the cumulative expenditures and commitments at the end of the fiscal year was $2,758,959.42, including $564,264.78 administrative expenditures and commitments. The breakdown of those costs are found on page 14. The total uncommitted funds as of June 30th, 2022 were $327,360.62. And just a note, the class fees paid by attendees for training classes was $255,007.25. Does anyone have any questions?
The only thing that I would like to note, this is Sherry Leffler, is on the packet information, the total funds available, the date on the fiscal report that was provided in the packet should be June 30th of 2022. So that a date change will be made prior to the fiscal report being publicized. But I just wanted to make sure that that was notated before the board approved it.
Thank you, Sherry.
Yeah, thank you, Dorothy.
Any additional questions by any of the board members about the financial report? Hearing none, then I'll ask for a motion to approve the financial report as presented.
John Bruno, Vice Chair. Motion to approve as presented.
Do I hear a second?
Joanne Reed, I second the motion.
Okay, any additional discussion from anyone on the board or staff or the public? Hearing none, then I'll ask for a roll call vote. Chairman Westover approves.
John Bruno, aye.
Bites, aye.
Joanne Reed, aye.
Norwood Bowden, aye.
Motion carries. The report's been approved.
What's up, man? What's going on?
All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is instructor certifications, and I'll recognize Nick Hartman if you would go over those applications for certification as instructor. Nick.
Thank you. Program staff is introducing, I believe, a couple instructors. The first one is Kevin Barrett.
Page,
Kevin,
please, Nick.
I'm
What
sure.
page is it count on?
Kevin is going to start on page 19. This is where the all of the instructors will follow afterwards. This is for Temple University. Kevin is a new instructor, and we're requesting the certification in the topics of general, communication, and firearms. His experience can be shown on this page. Staff is recommending board certification for Kevin Barrett for the topics listed above, which again are general, communication, and firearms. Does the board have any questions?
No, go ahead and go through, if you would,
Okay.
all the applications, and then we'll just
Sure.
we'll do it in one shot here.
Sure. The next application can be found on page 20, and this is for Daniel Bell. Daniel Bell is requesting for the topics of general and firearms. Based on review of his application, staff recommends board certification for Daniel Bell for the topics listed above. Again, that was general and firearms. The next application is James Kulak. James is requesting for general communication and crisis intervention, as well as firearms. His information can be found on page 21. Staff recommends board certification for James Kulak for the topics listed above. And then following James, we have Phil Maribile. Phil is requesting the topics of general communication, physical skills, and firearms. His information can be found on, it looks like the page number fell out. This should be page 22. His information can be found there. Staff recommends board certification for Phil Maribile for the topics listed above. And our final application is Dan Schaefer. Dan is requesting for general communication and firearms. His information can be found on page 22. Staff recommends board certification for Daniel Schaefer for the topics listed above. Are there any questions by the board on the instructors presented?
Okay, hearing none, I'll make a motion to approve these instructors presented. Do I have a second?
John Bruno, second.
Any further discussion for any board members or any comments by the public? Hearing none, then I'll ask for roll call vote. Chairman Westover, aye.
John Bruno, aye.
Joanne Reed, aye.
White's eye.
Norwood Foden, aye.
Okay, the motion is passed and these instructors have been approved. All right, we'll move on to our fourth action item, which is basic training and waivers for law enforcement officers, and I'll turn it over to Sherry Leffler at this time.
Thank you, Chair Westover. At the May 5th board meeting, during our discussion regarding the regulations, the board had asked staff to go back and provide more information on the law enforcement waivers for the 8-hour basic training classes. So the information staff have provided in the packet is we've basically taken this issue and we've given you the background, what the issue is, the history of the law enforcement waiver examination, and then also the background, including where it is presented in the regulations in Title 37. So as we have gone through this, we provided all this information. Staff sat down and did a formal review of all of the information, and we did an analysis of the law enforcement waivers. There again on page 24 of the packet, and I do apologize, it looks like we missed a page number under the instructor certifications. But on page 24, we have listed the facts that are known facts. If the staff, I know I'm hopeful that everyone was ever able to review this. So unless the board has specific questions, I'm not going to review everything that was provided until we get to the courses of action. So I'll just go over real briefly some of the facts. There is no legal requirement under Act 49 for the board to grant law enforcement waivers. The board has had law enforcement waiver eligibility and process in place for 26 years. Constables who are certified under Act 120, deputy sheriffs may apply, or Deputy Sheriff's Act 2 may apply for a waiver. We do have the eligibility, as stated previously in Title 37 in the board regulations. And then there are several other statistical things that we added there as well. So for example, from 1996 through 2021, we've had 156 law enforcement waivers that have been received. 150 have been approved. Of those, 134 have actually come in and taken the 100-question examination. And of those, we've had 126 that have passed. Also, if you would like to look on page, I believe it would be page 28. We also had an analysis done by another staff member here at PCCD on the law enforcement waiver information. So basically those stats I just reviewed, we have provided that in more detail for the board members in the packet as well to review that. Some of the assumptions, I'll go through several of those quickly too. If retained, the board we would want to have a clear standard for the law enforcement waivers. The board wants to ensure that constables being certified under Act 49 have met the same standards in regards to their education and their role and function and purpose as a constable serving the judiciary. There will still be a need for a law enforcement waiver of some type. That is an assumption as well. And then criteria for any type of waiver will need to be reviewed and updated in the board regulations then going further based upon any action that the board may take today regarding the law enforcement waivers. We have also outlined some constraints, which would be changes to Title 37, which is the board regulations, and going through that process with the Independent Regulatory Review Commission, which we refer to as IRRC. Another constraint would be the time that it would take to make those changes to the regulations. So with tasks needed to update the law enforcement waiver regulation. Basically what we are going through right now with the other changes to the regulations, those proposed changes would be reviewed by PCCD internal executive staff, including our legal counsel, the board, and then also the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. Those regulation changes are then submitted through IRC, the Independent Regulatory Review Commission, and their process. And there is a lot of staff time involved in doing this. Some critical information that needs to be considered is what would be the net goal or gain in revising the regulation, and would the changes to regulation result in any reduced liability, either for the individual constables, the board, or the commission. So the restated issue is the board would like to review, validate, and revise as needed the current law enforcement firearms, and that should not be firearms waiver, it should be basic training waiver regulation to ensure that it is equitable and consistent with the board's requirements of Act 49 initial certification. Currently, a current constable or deputy constable seeking a law enforcement waiver for the basic training completes a waiver application and then submits that to program staff. Program staff review the information and any supporting documentation and make a determination based on the information that is provided, whether or not that constable is eligible for that waiver. We do notify them in writing of their either eligibility or the denial of that waiver, and then they are scheduled to come in. We actually have them come in here to Harrisburg to take the waiver examination then. And as previously stated, the current waiver application or examination is 100 questions, and it proportionately covers most, if not all of the, let me correct that. It covers all of the subjects in the current 80-hour basic training courses that are provided by the program. If the constable passes that waiver exam, they are notified, and once they file their liability insurance through their county clerk of court's office, and my office receives it, they would then be certified and issued a certification number if applicable. So I will go through the courses of action that staff have come up with. And again, these are recommendations for the board to review, and the board may, take one or two and combine them and make another one. But that's why we're at least giving these recommendations to the board for their consideration. So for the first course of action we have is to eliminate the waiver altogether. We have listed pros and cons. I could go through those pros and cons so that is highlighted then during this discussion. So some of the pros of eliminating the waiver process altogether for constables and deputy constables, we would be ensured that the constable has the equivalent training to work for the courts, that someone who is going through the 80-hour basic training course they would have that same training. The same training standards would apply to all constables then. It would reduce potential for any conflicts or misinterpretations of the board regulations. It eliminates work for program staff for a very, very small percentage each year that we receive with the waiver applications. And then the board had also eliminated law enforcement firearms waivers in 2009. Two of the cons for this course of action would be that the board has already established a precedent over the last 26 years of providing a law enforcement waiver. And again, changes would be required in our computer system, the SET system as well. They would be very limited changes that would need to be made. Course of action number 2 would be to eliminate the waiver test, but have a training only option. The pros and cons of that course of action would be that it ensures the constable has training equivalent or relevant to working as a constable for the courts. Excuse me, for the judiciary. It reduces the potential for conflicts within the regulations and interpretations. Constable is required to pay and attend the basic trainings now. And we just basically broke out what staff felt would be an appropriate subjects for this option. So we included the role of the constable, which would be 4 hours, civil law, which would be 12 hours, criminal law, 8 hours, prisoner transport, 4 hours, for a total of 28 hours would be what we would be recommending. Both the sheriff or the sheriff's and deputy sheriff's program eliminated their waiver examination in 2004. The cons for this course of action would be basic training classes and times and locations would vary every year. The number of basics would vary each year. And the constables would have to wait until they are able to attend the next available training course. And again, this would involve some changes in sets, but they would be relatively minor. Course of action number 3 would be status quo. The pros to this course of action would be minor updates to the regulations just for clarification on the current law enforcement waiver regulations that exist. There would be, I know it does have changes required to sets here, but I'm not sure what Nick or Tracy, will you guys, actually John and Nick and Tracy met together to review these courses of actions. Nick or Tracy, can you recall any changes that would be necessary to sets if we kept it status quo? I'm not aware of any changes that would need to be made.
I think John kept that language in there just in case if there were to be a long-term effect that we would be making, just to make sure that we be mindful that this may be impacted later on, even on a smaller capacity. So like if anything were to be changed in the future, we just have to remember that the law enforcement waiver exam is still existing and that just the documentation. That was my understanding.
Okay, so yeah, there again, I mean, there would be no changes that I can think of right off the top of my head to sets. And we would continue to provide the law enforcement waiver for obtaining their Act 49 certification. Cons are, again, basic training classes, times and locations would vary each year. The number of the basic training classes would vary. They would have to wait, and again, that change is required to sets. So basically what staff did is we developed screening criteria, and the board has been through this exercise several times with staff, and we feel that this is the best approachable way to provoke a discussion amongst the board members on these courses of action. So the screening criteria that was reviewed and weighed by staff were to maintain standards, and that would mean to keep the current training quality and standards the board has developed over the life of the program. Reduce liability, which would be to make sure that the board is keeping regulations current with changes in generally accepted practices. Economy of time, which would be the best use of board and staff's time in relation to the law enforcement waiver examinations. And ease of validation. And this would be checking an applicant's training credentials, that it's standardized and consistent across program staff. So the staff went through and they gave assigned weights to the top 2 screening criteria, which were maintaining standards and reducing liability. And then as you can see, the little table that's provided there in the board packet, staff went through this exercise through all 4 of the screening criteria and weighed each one of those screening criteria. And the course of action number 1 received the highest total. And based upon that, staff is recommending that the board approve course of action number 1, which would mean to eliminate the law enforcement waiver for basic training completely from the regulations. And again, the training waiver information that was provided on the next page as well, just to give some more background information. Is there any questions or discussion amongst the board?
Yes, John Bruno here. Great job in putting this together. Let me ask the question of Major Reed. Major Reed, is there any waivers in place that the Pennsylvania State Police consider or entertain?
No, we do not consider any waivers. There's certain waivers like for college credits and like that, but everyone has to go through our basic training. All cadets go through the same training. Even if you were a state trooper in New Jersey or a local police officer, everything is the same.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I mean, it just seems like an incredible amount of time is devoted by staff on this particular endeavor of waiver. So I just think that Sherry certainly made the case, in my estimation, to eliminate the waiver completely.
Any other
Okay.
discussion or questions from the board members?
Yeah, this is Chairman Westover. So also, Major Reed, let me ask you this. So even Act 2 sheriffs, Act 49 constables, and as you said, from out-of-state troopers, out-of-state police or in-state police, that the thinking behind that, as I understand you, is you want to make sure that all your troopers are on the same page as far as training, correct?
Exactly, that is correct.
Okay. And that's been when I served on the board from 2000 to 2003, this was kind of an ongoing issue. And both as a student participating in classes over the years and as an instructor, when we would have heated discussions at a training class over curriculum, oftentimes I found the folks that had come through the waiver program didn't have a clear understanding, and particularly around the criminal law part. I had police officers who, when they would do the criminal law part of the basic training or the con ed, they would argue against, they felt they had more authority to arrest than what the curriculum stated. And also, as I understand, the Act 120 program in particular, there's no training on civil. So as far as levies and sales and the things that we typically do as constables, landlord tenants, things of that nature, there's no background on that. But my concern always is, there is a number of ways of getting your Act 120 certification, a number of different academies, and it's like everything else, it's not a cookie cutter. So my concern always has been primarily is liability for the board, allowing waiver people come through. So I'm also on board with course of action number 1 as far as elimination, but I'd like to hear from other board members what their thoughts are also.
This is Pites. I have to agree with both you and the Major Reed, Chairman. Also with John Bruno. We should eliminate it.
Okay. Ms. Soden, what do you think?
I mean, I certainly will defer to those who have been living this issue a lot longer than I've been a part of the board. My only question, and not that this is, a concern that would, change any decision, but I know some of the issues that that the program has had is just there's been not enough seats in the training. Is there any concern by adding additional numbers to the attendees of the classes that this is going to be more of a challenge to make sure that we're getting the constable certified in a timely manner for people that already have law enforcement experience, or at least the skill set that we're looking for that makes a quality constable?
Well, I'll defer to Ms.
I-
Leffler because I think
Yeah.
she's on top of what's going on already for next year for training, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and as far as Tricia, we normally only receive in a non-election year maybe 1 or 2 applications a
Okay.
year. Because of the influx of the new constables coming in, we have received, I believe it was 6 total this year.
Okay. All right.
Let me just double check and verify that before I say that, because then I'll say it and I'll be like, no, there was actually 12, but I don't think it was that many. Let me just verify here really quickly for you so we have that question answered. So this year, we have had, if I can get to the right sheet, I apologize. I should have pulled this up earlier. This year we have received 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 waiver exam applications. And of those, we have had at least 4 of those. 1, 2, 3 of those have been deemed ineligible due to either a filing time or not having the they were not Act 120 or Act 2, which would be municipal police or deputy sheriffs.
Yeah.
And those actually have come to the board for requests for reconsideration or exceptions, and the board has denied those exceptions.
Okay. Yeah, that was my only comment, but other than that, excellent work as always by program staff on providing the information to the board. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, John Bruno again. I'd just like to reiterate what Chairman Westover said, that being a constable is very unique. Duties, it has very unique duties and responsibilities. So in taking that into consideration, that's why it's so important to go through the process of our training and our education. So, I don't know, Craig, without further, discussion, in the interest of time, I would like to make a motion to eliminate the waiver process, or the waivers as they currently exist, from our act altogether.
Okay, just to clarify, John, then you're making a motion to adopt course of action number 1.
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay, I will second that motion. Any discussion from further discussion from the board members or the public? Hearing none, I'll ask for a roll call vote. Chairman Westover votes A.
John Bruno. White say.
Nord vote aye. For A, thank you.
Joanne Reed, aye.
Okay. I believe it was all affirmative. Any opposed? Motion is approved. All right, we'll move on to the second discussion item, which is weapon optics at basic firearms. And I requested to speak on this at the meeting. I had an occasion to be an instructor at a basic firearms class last month in Westmoreland. And I believe it's kind of for the first time that we've had at basic training, new constables coming in for their basic firearms class who had pistols that were equipped with optics. And the optics thing didn't work out quite so well, in particular because of the sun, the sunshine, the red dot was washing out. So one of the constables who had optics on his pistol struggled to get the right settings in order to be able to even see the dot. I had another firearm there that was equipped with optics, and actually to equip it with optics, the rear sight was removed from the gun and the optics were mounted in its place. And as a firearms instructor, I've attended national training. You know, I've gone out to nationally recognized firearms training companies, and typically optics on your firearm, whether it's a pistol, shotgun, or a rifle, are not permitted until you've demonstrated that you can qualify with iron sights. And my personal opinion is we're doing a disservice if we allow optics into the basic firearms. Saying that, subsequent years when you're coming back for your Con Ed for your show and shoot qualification, I'm not opposed to optics on your firearm, but I believe that a basic training academy that you really need to train and qualify on those iron sights, because my concern is the optics go down. If you haven't trained to run your iron sights and the optics go down, basically this firearm's become worthless. And especially if you have your rear sight totally removed. If your iron sights aren't co-witnessed with an optic, the optics go down, you're kind of a fish out of water. So I had a concern about that, but I wanted to share it with the board and see what their thoughts were. In particular, I wanted to ask Major Reed, at your training academy in Hershey for new cadets coming through, do you have a similar type prohibition?
Yes, actually currently, well, probably started about 6 months ago, our department started evaluating different optic options for our handguns. But we're still in that process, so it hasn't been determined if we're going to be allowed to have them or not. But as far as the rifle goes, when we use those, they do have optics on it, but our course of fire to qualification, you have to use the iron sights and the optics. Obviously, the optics are just a tool. People shouldn't be relying on them. And you need to still be proficient with the iron sights.
Thank you. And that's sort of the approach. I did a lot of training, especially in North Carolina area with some major companies, and that was their thought process all along, that with the optics, they're a great tool to enhance, but the fact of the matter is they are subject to failure, batteries, whatever, and weather conditions. So like I saw on the range, in July, there's typically no shade on the range. So when you're out there in the bright sun and you've got to play around with the optics in order to be able to see, to pick up the red dot, that's, once again, time is not your friend in this business. So, you need to be able to get on your sights and get the job done. So, other board members, what's your thoughts?
Makes perfect sense to me, John Bruno. Yeah, I mean, this is all about training and training at the basic level, and iron sights are, very, very basic. Yeah, I think I guess my only question is, do we write this into our regulations? How do we approach, making this mandatory?
Well, my thought process was, one thing we have not looked at is our basic training for firearms. It hasn't been, we have not reviewed that program in quite some time. And I guess if the board's favorable, what I'd like to see is maybe staff gather some board certified firearms instructors together, go through that basic firearms curriculum, and that could be one of the issues that's addressed, and then come back with a recommendation to the board. specifically A or nay on optics, along with any other changes that they might be saying. And I guess I'd like to defer to Sherry Leffler at this point and see what her thoughts is about that type of an undertaking and how long she would think it would take to get that accomplished.
Yes, actually, Chair, we have already discussed that internally as staff about pulling together some of our firearms instructors and having them come into PCCD and meet with us and review the basic firearms curriculum. As far as if the board would decide that they did not desire someone to have optics on their weapon or their firearm at the basic firearms training, that is something that we would incorporate in the curriculum. Unless the board felt very strongly about, making a motion and saying, having it as a board policy. But based upon the board's recommendation, we could make that change in the firearms curriculum during that review then as well. But we have already, I don't think anyone has been contacted, but we have talked internally about pulling a group together and doing just that.
What kind of a timeline are we looking at?
I'm going to defer to Megan here for a second too. Megan, I believe you were involved with the conversation with John regarding this. I don't know if he had suggested any timeframes or anything to you.
No, I don't have anything to provide at this point, Sherry.
Okay. I mean, honestly, Chair, I think it would probably be a pretty massive undertaking. But I would say that it would definitely could not be accomplished by the end of this year for 2023. And there's where I would recommend that if the board feels strongly about this, we could put it into the curriculum as like a change, that the board would not allow optics at the basic firearms training, but that you would be allowed to have the optics at the annual firearms qualification. And that would just be, and that falls under, our processes and procedures. So I don't feel that we would have to take any formal, action for that. But just based on that recommendation by the board, we could put that change policy out to the schools and the instructors to not allow optics. And we would also notify the constable population as well. And then, we are working on the board regulations too. And if the board felt strongly about that, we could put that into regulation as well. But as far as review, I would say it would probably take at least 6 to 8 months, if not a year, to pull all that together, bring information back to the board, and have a final product done, I would say within 6 to 8 months.
Okay. Well, I'll say this, it was somewhat of a distraction because there was a variety of issues, with the 2 pistols we had there that, we're fighting through the optic thing. So I would like to see that, right away, if possible, for our basic firearms, but then also look at that issue and then formally, during the review of the curriculum for the basic training, then at that point also address it there. And that way there's a basis of a number of instructors, just not me. Though I got to tell you, I had a discussion with other firearms instructors at that class to see what their thoughts were, and really had nobody that, recommended that we allow optics in basics. So at this point, that's kind of my attitude about the situation, is maybe an immediate ban on them. And if that's something that's a recommendation, then I'd like to ask the rest of the board members if they agree with that, so that staff could move forward with this.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that we could put into place this year. We do have 1 basic firearms remaining for this year, but we would take the board's recommendation and make sure that was effective then for this class this year.
Can I just ask, because, so you're saying there's only 1 more firearms class scheduled for the remainder of the year, correct?
Basic firearms, correct.
Basic firearms.
Yes.
Would this cause any kind of an issue with the folks that are participating in that final class that maybe was anticipating having, maybe they have optics on their weapon? I'm just thinking about consistency. I mean, again, I don't know if we have some kind of a obligation to be, consistent with how we treat all of the classes or not.
Yeah, my thought process is, number one, this was kind of the first that I've seen that coming, but I know the trend now is, it's the latest and the greatest. So the marketing campaigns that are going on out there, optics is one of those things that's majorly being marketed by the gun companies, to enhance your shooting skills. But the fact of the matter is, it's kind of a catch-all. Everybody from civilians to law enforcement to military, this optic thing is being pushed. And I never dreamed we were going to have anybody show up with optics on their farm for a basic class. So I guess we were just slow to the gate, but we've actually had a real-time experiment with what did occur, and it wasn't favorable, as far as I was concerned. So, and especially with removing sights in order to have optics, I just, that to me is a non-starter, because I'm telling you, the optics go down and you don't have one of the sites on your farm to get sight alignment in order to effectively run that farm. It's just not going to happen. So I at this point, I would be in favor of just shutting this down now before it gets any traction, and we start seeing more and more optics coming into the basics across the state. I'd like to stop this before it gets really started.
Yeah, that's fair. Thank you.
So do I have a recommendation from the other members of the board to move forward with this, and then also with a review of the basic firearms curriculum being accomplished with staff and board certified firearms instructors?
Do we need a motion for that?
I believe just a recommendation, correct, Sherry?
Yeah, I don't know that it has to be a formal motion, just a recommendation for staff to start pursuing this.
Okay.
I recommend that the staff start pursuing the information as discussed.
Okay.
I second that.
Okay, good. Major Reed?
Agreed.
Yes, I
Right.
agree.
Okay. And Patricia, you also agree?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, agreed.
Okay. All right, very good. All right, then I guess we'll move on to the board regulations revision discussion with Sherry Lepler.
Before we get to that, I would like to go over my supervisor's report
Okay.
as a question item. And I'll just go, you got, all the board members have been provided this information, so I'll go through it fairly quickly. But just as an update for the other people in the audience in attendance. So the status of the 2022 trainings, we have had completed 25 continuing education classes. We have had to cancel 7. 39 have been scheduled, 25 completed, 7 canceled. We've had 580 constables and deputy constables successfully complete the in-person training. The online subject trainings are not going as well as what we would have hoped, being in August. Right now, we have had 308 out of 817 enrollments, which would be 38%, have completed crisis intervention. We've had 267 out of 817 that were enrolled. So 33% have completed legal updates, and then 278 out of 817, or 34%, have completed the service of criminal warrants. Staff have drafted and finalized a training bulletin, which will include another reminder of the deadline of November 18th, 2022 at 5 p.m. for the completion of the online subjects. There are 3 4-hour online subjects that must be completed in conjunction with the 8 hours of defensive tactics in the classroom to maintain certification for 2023. We have had 220 that have completed all of the requirements and have been recertified for 2023. The 5-hour annual firearms qualifications, we had 40 classes scheduled. 21 have been completed, and we've canceled 6 statewide. We have had 380 who have attempted qualification. Of those, 316 have successfully qualified. We have had 21 failures for about a 4.4% failure rate for the year so far. As far as the basic trainings, again, all 4 of the basic training classes are full to capacity. the last basic training of the year. We have one going on right now in Franklin County. The Franklin County Public Safety Center. We have 30 in that class. There is one person who is retaking a failed subject, which the board addressed at the last board meeting. And the class coming up in October, we have 40 enrolled in that class, and that class will be held at the Lancaster County Public Safety Center in October. That last class of the year is going to be held Monday through Friday, whereas all the other basic training classes were held Friday evening, Saturday, and Sunday for 20 hours, 4 weekends in a row to get the 80 hours in. Basic firearms courses. We have had 2 basic firearms courses that have been successfully completed. We have had in one of the classes, we had 5 failures, but there was also a weapon malfunction. We do have 2 classes remaining, and we have 2 enrolled in the Southwest 02 basic firearms, and we have 7 enrolled in the Southeast 02 basic firearms. And as I explained to the current individuals in the current 80-hour basic training class, we are working on the 2023 schedule. We are hopeful to have the initial basic training classes have been confirmed and dates have been confirmed. We will be contacting, there's approximately 182 individuals that have registered with us that we will be reaching out to they will have the first come, first serve on those basic training classes for 2023. We also are working on the basic firearms courses for next year as well. We have one that is going to be scheduled the second week in January, and that class is going to be offered to the individuals who completed the 80-hour basic training in 2022, but could not get enrolled into the 40-hour basic firearms in 2022. So we're going to offer that class to those individuals first. If there's any availability, then it will be open to the general population then. But staff felt that it was best to try to get those individuals who weren't able to get in this year taken care of, both with the basic trainings and the basic firearms. And we will have 6 basic trainings next year, and 7 basic firearms classes are being scheduled. We are still processing class payments. Staff have processed probably 215 or more class payments this year. That is both for the basic training, basic firearms, no shows, and failures. We already reviewed waiver applications. The current certifications, I'll just review very quickly as well. Right now at this point, we have 789 active and certified constables. In August of 2021, we had 901. So I wanted to point those numbers out. Firearm certifications, we have 614, or 78% of the population is firearm certified. In August of 2021, we had 728 individuals who were firearm certified. As of today, the program and the board have issued 4,713 certifications through the 80-hour basic training or through the law enforcement waiver examination. And then I will close with the COVID protocols. Both Penn State University and Temple University have removed their mandatory mask mandates. Staff will be getting information out to the constable population, hopefully within the day or 2 regarding this. So both of the schools have removed their mask mandates. Is there any questions on any of the information that was provided in the supervisor's report? Hearing none, then we can move on to the board regulation discussion. Now, based upon the decision that the board just made on the law enforcement waivers, we will have some additional sections that will be deleted from the regulations. We have also gone through since the May meeting. Staff did go back and make the changes that were discussed at the May meeting on May 5th. And while I was doing those changes, we had an inconsistent use of the terms calendar year and training year. So all references to training year have been deleted, and we are going to use the term calendar year for consistency throughout the regulations. Formatting, I did hear from board member Norwood Foden regarding some formatting issues that she had discovered in the regulation document. Once all of the current changes that have been highlighted in the document that was provided to the board, once that happens, staff will go back and make a very conscientious effort to make sure that all the formatting, numbers, letters, subparagraphs, everything is numbered and formatted correctly then. So we will address that then. Coming back to the board in November, I was hopeful that we would have a good draft to provide to you. So going forward, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, if the board has no other comments, edits, or anything on the edits that we have provided for this board meeting, what I will do is I will accept all those changes and come back to you in November with a clean document on how the regulations would look, so it doesn't have all those editing, track changes, and that kind of thing in it as well. So it'll be an easier read, and that will be including deleting out anything relative to the law enforcement basic training waiver then as well. Do I have any questions, comments, or concerns on any of the updates that were provided previously for the board regulation changes? Okay, hearing none. With these latest changes that were just discussed with the board action, like I said, I will come back to the board in November with a cleaned up version of the regulations, and hopefully at that time, if there's no further discussion or comments or changes necessary, we can then start going through the internal process through PCCD for the board regulations, and then hopefully get them over to IRC sometime in 2023.
Okay,
And
thank
that's
you.
all I got.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. Appreciate it. Hey, by the way, when you're talking about COVID, moving forward with our meetings, what are we looking at COVID-wise for the building down there?
Well, I just talked with our executive assistant to the executive director, and she had stated they will be holding the September board meeting as a hybrid, so both in person and via Teams. Once we can get confirmation that everything is working correctly, then we will try hopefully for November. I had some difficulties this morning being here in the building, and I did have some difficulties getting into the Teams meeting this morning. So I'm still not 100% confident that it's going to work, but that's my personal opinion.
So it's more of an IT issue right now than anything else.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
But we're hopeful that we can hopefully have the November meeting as a hybrid, both in person and via Teams.
Okay. Well, that would be good if we can hopefully move forward here and, maybe get back to some in-person meetings. Did the board members have any other items that they'd like to discuss at this time?
I do not have any.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just said I don't have any.
Okay, very good, very good. Anybody else? All right.
There's only question.
Yeah, go ahead.
When is our next meeting in John Bruno here? When is our next meeting in November date?
I believe it is November 3rd. Is that correct, staff? I don't have my calendar in front of me. Yes, it is November 3rd.
November 3?
Yep, November 3rd.
Okay, thank you.
We normally go with the second Thursday of the month or the quarter, but we already had another meeting was booked here in the rooms and for that day. Okay. So we had to go with the 10th or the 3rd. I'm sorry. So it is November 3rd, and then we will get information out if it's going to be a hybrid, both in person and via Teams.
Okay. All right. At this point, we'll move to informational items. Do we have anything under that section?
We do not.
Okay. We'll move on to other business. Anything for other business? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to public voice. And at this point, we'll open the floor to the public voice section. Each person who requested a comment prior to the meeting will be announced separately. Please keep your comments to 2 minutes or less. If you have no public comments or questions, please indicate so. And the public voice is open to any other constable or person who would like to address the board. And if you decide to address the board, I ask that you clearly state your full name and county or organization represented. Constables should provide their certification number, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes or less. So I'll defer to Tracy Beaver at this time. Do you have anybody on the list?
Chair Westover, there was no one who responded that they wanted to speak during public voice. So the floor is yours to open up.
Okay. So at this time, is there anybody on the call that would like to address the board?
Constable Michael Ludwig, Montgomery County.
I had more than one chime in at the same time. Let's take it one at a time. Try it again.
I think I heard Michael.
Yes, Constable Michael Ludwig, Montgomery County.
Okay,
Thank
you have a certification number?
I do not. It's been a long process for me to try to get that, but that's for another day.
Okay. Okay, your comments, sir.
I'd like to ask for an update, if possible, on the use of the the new GI Bill for constables. There's a process that the school has to go to get the CA to pay for the training. And then lastly, if the board could provide the policy on when a spot comes open in a training, like this most recent training, there was a withdrawal. Do they not fill the position, or do they leave it vacant? It would make no sense why they wouldn't offer it to a later enrolled constable.
I can address those, Chair. As far as the eligibility through Veterans Affairs under the GI Bill for the payment for the basic training, we have provided the Veterans Administration with our 80-hour basic training curriculum. They have to review that and basically vet our curriculum, meets their standards. We have a meeting, internal meeting set up, I believe it is next week, with staff. And then we will get back in touch with the Veterans Administration. But at this point, we're basically waiting for their review and approval of our curriculum in order to actually start the process to have it as a vetted program for eligibility for the GI Bill. So we are currently working on that. And then as far as enrollments or people removing themselves from enrollments, we have had several cancellations. And with those cancellations, what we have been doing is notifying individuals. Earlier, I had mentioned that we had 182 individuals that were in sets waiting for a spot in the basic training class. So the class that you were referring to, we did have someone remove themselves, ask for a reimbursement. We contacted basically the next person on the list that is currently in the system of those 181 people. They do not have a spot in a class. So that's why we were offering that spot to them. My understanding, sir, is that you already have a spot in the October class. So we would not have reached out to anyone in the October class to offer the spot up in the August class. And the reason being behind that is because you already have a spot in a class. Also, as far as the payments, there was an individual who, it was 2 weeks prior to the class start date that they advised us that they could not attend that class. Staff and I did discuss it, and we did not feel that we had enough time to get a class payment from an individual, reach out to someone, get their class payment received prior to the start of that class. Honestly, I think that's being reasonable. 2 weeks prior to a class and someone cancels out, especially when we are receiving payments via the U.S. Postal Service, and that payment receipt is dependent upon that enrollment in that class. Does that help?
I appreciate the update. Just want to say that I advised you I'd do it at short notice. I had already paid. I may not be able to do the later training, which is what I tried to tell Nick. So you guys have been very unhelpful, but I will continue to try to get through this process. Thank you for the update.
Your comment is duly noted. Thank you.
Hello, Dominic Brown, Franklin County. And the agency I'm representing, I guess myself, constable. The only question I have, and I don't know if I'm phrasing it right, I would like to know, is there any rules against me trying to be, to help out the dog warden? I think her name is Jodrina Martin or something. Because I was doing some research and just trying to get as much training as possible. So I was just wondering if that is possible, if there's a rule or something against that. Because I'm new, so I don't know. So that's what I'm asking.
Chair Westover, would you like to address that?
You're muted, Chair Westover.
I think you may be muted, Craig.
Yeah, I guess my question is, the dog warden's requesting you accompany them when they go out. Is that correct?
Sir, she said they're short dog wardens, so she wants to know if I wanted to take training to help out with, I guess, the dog warden stuff. Like, I don't know what all it entails, so I'm just confused as you are. So I'm sorry.
No, that's quite all right. But I guess, I always defer to the attorneys. Number one, is there a conflict of interest in the law? Are you permitted to do another activity? Typically, our program is geared towards training people to work for the courts. So that's our mission. Act 49, the General Assembly, our mission is that we train people to do court work. So when we get into these other things, we really can't comment on that or offer opinions on that. And that's where I would say your dog warden needs to, talk with their agency to see what their policy is and go from there as far as talking with the attorneys to see what's permissible or not. But, that's outside our bailiwick as a training provider for, the constables learning how to serve judicial work. So that's basically my position on it. Sherry, do you disagree with that?
No, I do not. I agree 100% with that, Craig. There again, the intent of the program is to train and certify constables to perform work for the judiciary. Anything outside of that would be considered your own liability.
Okay. Sorry, I can't answer your question any better than that, but that's about the best we can do at this point.
You always jump in here. You always have to be concerned about a conflict of interest, especially when it comes to another governmental agency there. So your best bet is, like I said, talk to maybe your township or your local solicitor in respect to what is permitted under statute and what is not.
Okay. Because this is Dominic Brown again. So just to answer your questions, I'm gonna try to answer them best as I can. So I'm also a borough council member in Chambersburg. So I did contact the solicitor, which is Steve from Austin Hughes. He said it wouldn't be a conflict because they can request. The borough will basically vote on me doing that for Franklin County because she said she regulates Franklin and Fulton County. So because she came before the town council as well. So Sauceman Hughes just said make sure that I consult with someone from the constable side to make sure it wasn't an interference, but they see no problem on the side of borough council and the dog warden side of it.
You say you're a borough council. You're a borough councilman.
Yes.
How are you a constable?
Yeah, I mean, here's the question I have. There's something very specific in statute. It's called.
I can't hear you. Say that again.
Where there's competing or incompatible offices, I believe it's called, and it lists the incompatible offices and what you can and cannot hold simultaneously. And I don't have that in front of me. Perhaps Deborah, if you're listening, you could chime in. But there is a specific statute that addresses that. So you might want to look very closely at that. It's called, I believe it's called incompatible offices.
Good morning. This is Deborah Sand for Mr. Chair. If you would like me to just chime in, I would.
Yeah, I'd like you to, Deborah, because also you remember in basic training we cover Commonwealth versus Legree, and so which addresses more than one Office of Public Trust. So yes, if you would weigh in, I'd appreciate it.
It's what the chair indicated at the outset is, and this is really kind of difficult for people to grasp sometimes, and I really do get it. But the purpose of this board is education and training. There is no other kind of authority, if you will, that the board has over the constable, who is an independent contractor with whomever assigns a particular task. And again, the training of this board is geared toward training the constable to do work for the judiciary. Anything else that the constable chooses to do as an independent contractor would have to do with the rules, regs, and requirements of the particular entity that the constable is going to be working with or working for. But you're not under the authority of the constable's board except in the area of education and training. So that's why I move away from advising you with any kind of legal advice about these potential positions and entities. You have to go to them and find out from them what they consider to be a conflict or something you can or cannot do. But there is no conflict that exists with your education and training through the Constable's Education and Training Board. I don't know if that makes it more confusing, but I appreciate that someone advised you to come to the board and ask for their information, but there's a limit on, again, this board's authority over your activities outside of what they train and educate you on.
And
okay, thank you guys. You answered it because I'm new. I'm new, so I don't know. So that's why, I just figured, I'd ask. But I appreciate all the guidance you guys are saying, and I'm taking it in and taking notes. So I greatly appreciate it.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other constables want to address the board?
Kevin Herrick, Lackawanna County.
Go ahead.
My borough looked up if they were allowed to make payments for me to take the constable certification. And according to them, by law, they're not allowed to contribute to any of my education. Is that true, or are they allowed to pay for my education for the constable training?
Well, I'd have to say from the outset, one of the things that we, found or talk about consistently in the basic training is you're an independent contractor. So this is where the separation from the government, giving you money to train, a local government entity to give you money for equipment, to give you money for other things for your position. Ultimately, you're classified by the Supreme Court as an independent contractor, and that's where it becomes a slippery slope, because you also have the IRS looking over the shoulder of the relationships between constables and the government. And so the IRS looks at, are you now an employee because they've provided money for this or that or whatever else? And so I would defer to the fact that the independent contractor, that's the thing that you need to look at, and that would be the definition that any entity that wanted to give you money would look at that independent contractor definition, before they'd make any determination. And once again, I'd like to have my solicitor weigh in on this. Deborah?
Here again, yeah, of all the counties in this Commonwealth, there may in fact be some counties that have some sort of provision where they're going to retain a constable. I do not know, but in general, the relationship of the constable is simply that of an independent contractor to the particular judiciary who assigns the task. If it is the case that in your county there is or is not some sort of provision to pay for your education and training, that would probably be something that this board hasn't seen a lot of, and that might be a question you go back to your county and ask about. But yeah, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, that answers it perfectly. One other question, since the certification only entails working for the judiciary, if I walk up on just say somebody snorting cocaine on a park bench, I am allowed to arrest them, correct?
Well, once again, you want to defer to the local rules. You need to talk with, the area that you are a constable in as to what their provision is for breach of the peace violations. And once again, this is something that the board can't really advise you on because we're strictly, I look at it as kind of a boxed in room. We handle training. We handle for the courts. And that's where anything outside of us, we're not the entity to comment on that.
Okay. I'll check with my district attorney. He's a pretty good friend of mine.
There you go.
I thank you very much for listening to my questions and comments, and you have a good day. Thanks for having me.
I do believe we had a module one time that was sort of like captioned "Be a Good Witness," and you want to like revisit that. It tells you, sort of gives you an idea of the things that we can and cannot do. I mean, being a constable is, you really have to know what your duties and responsibilities are, and even more importantly, what they are not. So that's usually a good rule. So, I mean, we did have that module back there, which sort of kind of addresses something that, you're running into there. I would recommend you revisit that.
Okay, what module is that? Where do I find that?
I believe it was entitled Constable as a Good Witness. Am I correct, Craig or Sherry? A few years back.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, but I could do a little bit of research, but it wouldn't be necessarily readily available for the constables to review because we don't have like a resource account for old curriculum. So it would be something that would have to be revisited in future curriculum.
Yeah, it's probably in a booklet somewhere or a disc. I don't know. But maybe about 2, 3, 4 years ago, I remember being a module. Pretty good one.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I always say, defer to your local authorities, and that a good choice is the district attorney, because the district attorney for your county, that's the person really you need to touch base with in order to get the answers of what's permissible, in their county. Any other comments, please?
Yes, this is Constable Troy Hay out of Bedford County, certification number B004398.
Thank you.
Go ahead. I don't know if this is I want to comment on the issue with on-site review. I don't know if they're still listening or not, but according to what other law enforcement agencies in my county that have told me, and speaking to the DA, if you use something like what he's seen, the best course of action is to be a good witness, call the local agency in and let them do the work. He needs to look at that, watch that video. Another question, what I originally want to ask is, I don't know if this is the right place to do it or not, but when you have a non-traffic and traffic, and you got to take them in per hearing, there's 2 different traffic citations. One's a non-traffic and one's traffic. Regarding fees, do you get, let me grab one of my fee sheets. I should have been more prepared. My question is, on each one, you get, I know you get your warrant costs and all that, take into custody, attend hearing and all that, on all of them, or be in separate courts, or am I mistaken?
Well, it boils right back down to what we cover in the basic training, and that is we provide the information about the fee bill from a state perspective. However, local rules, county by county, and even within the county, court by court, district judges have different interpretations of the fee bill. What one court may pay, the next court over may not. So the board can only comment on the curriculum that we present with the fee bill, and we outline what each of those fees are. Generally, there's not a standardized fee sheet. As you notice, there's not an AOPC form that is considered a fee sheet, that each county drafts their own. So you can look at 5 different counties and see 5 different styles of fee sheets. And that's why we'd love to have this as a cookie cutter, but the fact of the matter is it comes down to interpretation by the person in the black robe, and they decide, what they want to pay and what they don't want to pay. And at this point, there's no really statewide enforcement mechanism. And Ms. Leffler, you want to weigh in on that at all?
No, I agree with everything that you said, Chair Westover.
Okay. So I know that doesn't answer your question, but unfortunately, that's the best we can offer you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But in a way, it does, because like I talked to all 3 judges, and they all 3 had said that that basically, I guess they talked to the help desk, and they said that each office does it. That they're allowed to choose what they're allowed to pay. I just wanted a little bit of confirmation on that, because I was having a hard time explaining that to another constable that I work with, because there was an issue with him not getting paid for something, but one office did and another office didn't do it. Well, it's not because there was 2 constables. So that, in a way, answered my question. I appreciate your time. And I wanted to make a comment on the fact that this is my first time listening to the meeting. It was very well conducted, and I appreciate you giving me time.
Okay, you're welcome. I'd also like Patricia, as a court administrator for Chester, to also, expound on this a little bit, if you would, Patricia.
Absolutely. My question to the constable would be, do you know whether or not your county enacted or created a constable review board? That was a suggestion through the statewide handbook that came out from the UJS a few years ago. Because if your county has a constable review board, that might be the appropriate avenue to take. My other suggestion would be, I'm not sure how your county sets up the payment structure. If those fees and costs are referred to the county for payment, then you may want to run that question by your payment authority, whether it be the controller's office. Those would just be a couple of suggestions for clarification. And ultimately, too, if your county has a handbook that they've adopted, they might have language in there regarding, who actually has final determination on how payment is made. In Chester County, where I'm from, the payment policies are actually governed by our controller's office. So whenever there's any payment disputes, we usually refer the constable to speak, or at least to go to the controller's office. And if they need a deeper review, to file with our local constable review board. So that would just be the direction that I would point that constable in, if he's looking for additional clarification on payment.
Very, very good, Patricia. Those are very good comments. And a review board, is something that, particularly like our county, has that. And when we have disputes over fees, that's where we file that, and then the review board looks at it. So I think that's a great way to go. Your county has adopted a review board, and like you said, a handbook. So that's great. All right. Well, I hope that sufficiently answers your question for you. And if there's nothing else, we'll find out. Is there any other constables that want to comment at this time?
Abraham Smith, Westmoreland County.
Go ahead, Mr. Smith. You have a certification number?
I do, B004697.
Thank you.
I just want to make one quick comment for the previous constable. The dog law in Pennsylvania specifically references constables under the term police officer in their definitions of who can enforce the law. So that may be a starting point where he and his municipality want to look for that. And also, this is directed to the board. I thought this back when we had BASIC a few months ago, but I hesitated to say it during the class. But I believe, and a number of lawyers, including myself, believe that Laguerre is no longer good law. If you shepherdize it, and if the council online knows shepardizing, it will come back as good law. But if you analyze it, you do a deep dive on it, it was based on a version of the statute that no longer exists. It was repealed. And I would invite your curriculum development people to dialogue with me if they wish further on that.
Okay, great. Great suggestions, Abraham. We appreciate that. Anything further?
And one last quick, one quick administrative question. When you all get back to doing the in-person meetings or hybrid, has there been any thought given to utilizing Zoom or some similar platform that's not just audio but visual as well?
Ms. Scheffler.
I can address that. Teams is very similar product to Zoom, but we have to use the products that are supplied through the Commonwealth, and that unfortunately is Microsoft products. And that's what we have to use Teams for that.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Yep.
Any other constables? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move towards adjournment. I would inquire if anybody else has joined a meeting who was not previously noted for attendance purposes. Okay, hearing none, then I'll request a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Right,
John Bruno, motion made to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, I recognize John Bruno making the motion. Do I have a second?
Right, I'll second that motion.
Okay, Constable Pikes is recognized as making a second. Any further discussion? I'll have a vote. All in favor? Constable or Chairman Westover, aye.
Bruno, aye.
Right, aye.
Joanne Reed, aye.
Any
Norwood
nays?
Foden, aye.
Okay, any nays? Okay, motion is approved and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you all for attending. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.